Medieval art really holds a whole different kind of place in the history books compared to anything else. It's not just because of all the heavy religious stuff or how historically important it is, but honestly, it's mostly because the whole thing is just plain gloriously weird. I mean, when you look at these old paintings, manuscripts, and church walls, you'll see brave knights trying to fight giant snails, tall trees, and women drawn with some pretty questionable anatomy, showing us a world where being bizarre was totally the norm. Heck, making things strange was basically their main rule of thumb when designing stuff back then, so it really shouldn't come as any surprise that we all find this stuff way more entertaining than we probably ought to. Let's take a little trip back in time to the Middle Ages so we can check out some creepy beasts, gruesome scenes, and these hilarious little babies that somehow look like 40-year-old accountants. Now, right before we dive headfirst into all of that, I've got one simple question for you, my friend. Why? Picture this for a second. You're a monk back in the 1400s, freezing your tail off in a drafty room, spending hours copying down holy text by hand. Eventually, pure boredom sets in, and your mind just starts wandering off into space. Before you even realise what you're doing, you look down at the page and see this totally ridiculous little monster you just doodled in the margins. Then, oh man, the abbot walks right into the room, catches you red-handed, and demands to know what on earth you were thinking when you drew that hideous creature. Well, folks, that exact funny setup is the whole idea behind a fantastic card game called Brother Y. It's a totally wild medieval party game that features real crazy doodles taken right from historical manuscripts, all printed on top-notch textured cards. How it works is every player gets a card showing a funny little creature alongside a super serious quote card, and you have to make up a convincing reason why you drew that crazy thing right next to such an important piece of writing. The folks over at Hive Mind Games just put out the 1.5 version of Brother Y, and they added some great new rules to make the game run smoother and be a whole lot easier for anyone to jump into. I've been having an absolute blast playing this with my buddies lately. It's super simple to learn right out of the box, making it perfect for pretty much any kind of get-together, big or small. If you get a kick out of weird medieval margin doodles as much as we do around here, I guarantee you're going to have a fantastic time with this game. The independent creator behind it is a solo dev based over in England, and they've already sold a massive pile of these games. The best news is that it just became available here in the States for the very first time, with a release in the rest of Europe right around the corners. So if you want to grab yourself a copy of Brother Y and directly help support what we're doing on this channel, go ahead and click the link down below and definitely drop me a comment to let me know if you picked one up. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on it, since I've been having such a good time with it myself. Now, without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. So you're probably asking yourself, what's the real story behind all these creepy looking medieval babies anyway? Well, it helps to keep in mind that a lot of these weird, downright unsettling little infants you see in medieval artwork were never actually supposed to be normal everyday kids in the first place. Most of the time, they were actually trying to paint baby Jesus. Now, according to what folks believed back then, Christ didn't come into this world to slowly grow into his holy nature over time. He showed up on day one already totally perfect, fully formed, and completely divine right out of the gate. As you can imagine, that belief threw a massive curveball at the painters of the day. Medieval artists didn't really have many tools or techniques for drawing realistic infants to begin with, and they had even fewer ways to show a baby that was supposed to be a regular human while simultaneously being eternal God. So to solve that problem, they ended up with the famously bizarre look we all recognise today, tiny little toddler bodies sporting solemn, world-weary faces that look like they've seen it all. The main way artists handled this was basically by sticking an adult man's face onto a child's body, portraying Jesus as a miniature adult who possessed full wisdom and authority from the moment he was born. To those of us looking at these paintings today, the whole thing can look pretty darn weird, if not outright creepy. But back in their own time, these choices made complete sense because they were focused on religious ideas rather than realistic pictures. Those medieval painters weren't actually trying to capture what a real baby looks like. They were just trying to figure out how to paint heavy, complex ideas like holy perfection and God becoming man. Now, if you really want to talk about where medieval art gets truly bizarre, you've got to look at margin art, those crazy little creatures, quick jokes and random scenes shoved into the borders of handwritten books. None of this stuff happened by mistake either. The people buying these books actually asked for these weird doodles when ordering them, which means somebody out there willingly spent their hard-earned cash to have an artist paint a guy playing the bagpipes with his backside. Because of that, you end up with this wild, hilarious mix where holy scriptures and complete nonsense are sitting right next to each other on the exact same page. One thing those artists loved drawing more than almost anything else was snails, and they specifically loved showing them locked in heroic life-or-death battles with armoured knights. You can flip through manuscript after manuscript from all over Europe and see fully geared up warriors bracing for impact against snails the size of miniature horses, like fighting giant garden pests was just another average Tuesday for a knight. So what was the deal with these artists being so obsessed with this whole knight versus snail showdown? Well, historians have come up with a whole buffet of theories to explain it. Some folks think the snails were a dig at Lombardy, a group the French thought were total cowards, while others reckon it represented guys struggling against female temptation. Then you've got people who think it was actually a religious symbol for coming back from the dead, since snails pull back into their shells and pop right back out later. Another pretty popular idea is that it was a jab at social climbers, folks who are slow, slimy, and constantly inching their way up the ladder. And of course, there's the simplest explanation of the bunch. The artist just had a funny bone and loved sneaking a quick joke onto the page whenever the boss turned his back. Since this whole knight and snail thing pops up so darn often, the joke was almost certainly crystal clear to everyday people living back then. Whatever the real story was, this battle between warriors and gastropods is still one of the absolute funniest mysteries from that era. It just goes to show you that even in a time ruled by kings, strict religion and serious business, somebody sitting in that copying room was having themselves an absolute blast. And don't even get me started on the homicidal bunnies. These days, most of us look at rabbits and think of cute, fluffy little critters, or maybe that chocolate Easter bunny sitting in a basket. But if you flip open a medieval manuscript, those sweet little cottontails turn into something a whole lot more nightmare-inducing. Scribes all across Europe seem to have taken pure joy in drawing rabbits as straight-up violent monsters that took way too much pleasure in terrorising human beings. You can toss out any ideas about them being harmless and cuddly. In the world of medieval art, these bunnies were flat-out terrifying. We're talking about bloodthirsty little critters that would actively hunt down fully armoured knights, wave around deadly weapons and spark utter chaos wherever they went. Take the Smithfield Decretals, for example. That's a massive collection of legal writings from the 1300s. In one section, you've got a rabbit holding a whole adult man in a headlock, while another equally vicious bunny swings a heavy mace right at his skull. In other book margins, you'll see them chasing people down, swinging sharp axes and swords, and carrying out executions with ice-cold, chilling efficiency. It's almost like all these artists got together and decided that the most dangerous apex predator in all of Europe wasn't the wolf, but the humble rabbit. And to make it even crazier, the bunnies look like they're having the absolute time of their lives doing it, firing off bows and lances, with some of them even riding into battle on the backs of giant snails. So why in the world were these medieval bunnies so utterly bloodthirsty? Well, just like with the snails, historians have kicked around a few different ideas over the years. Some folks believe these killer rabbits were actually a clever way to mock chivalry, poking fun at the famous bravery of knights by having them get beaten up by harmless prey animals. Other experts think it reflected a deep fear of the natural world being flipped upside down, where the prey becomes the hunter. And once again, you've got the most straightforward theory of all. Those medieval painters just had a really goofy sense of humour and used the margins as their own personal comic strip. Now, if you want to talk about bizarre medieval stonework, you've got to mention the Sheila Nagig. Basically, a Sheila Nagig is a stone carving showing a completely naked woman with a wildly exaggerated exposed vulva. These bizarre figures were built right into the architecture of buildings all over Europe, popping up on everything from grand cathedrals and medieval castles to local parish churches and a surprisingly wide variety of other structures. You can spot them scattered throughout Britain, France and Spain, but Ireland holds the ultimate record with at least 124 of these unique carvings still standing today. In quite a few spots, you'll see them carved right alongside male figures or other symbolic stone artwork. Even though historians are still locking horns over what these carvings were actually meant for, experts have tossed around a whole bunch of different explanations. Some think they were meant to be symbols for fertility, while others reckon they were apotropaic, which is just a fancy way of saying a good luck charm meant to ward off evil spirits. Then there are folks who believe they were sculpted as a strict moral warning against lust, or maybe even as a piece of sarcastic social commentary carved into stone. Regardless of what the original masons were actually trying to say, the Sheila Nargigs stand out as some of the most striking and downright mysterious figures in all of medieval history. Back in 1835, when a guy named Jules Michelet visited Bourges Cathedral over in France, he noticed little crude, dirty images carved practically everywhere he looked. He ended up calling them grotesques, but it was one specific carving of a bulbous rear end, pants yanked down to hang right below its round cheeks, that really caught his eye. It's what the British art historian Michael Camille famously called the very essence of assness. Over at the Church of Saint-Pierre in Saint-Maixent in western France, they carved a guy right beneath one of the wooden choir stalls. The figure's nose is literally pinned to the underside of the seat so that it looks like he's directly sniffing the backside of whoever sits down. Then you've got the gargoyles sticking out from the sides of Gothic cathedrals to drain rainwater off the roof. A lot of them were carved with their butts facing right out toward the street, so the water literally channeled out from between their cheeks. Even the Gorliston Psalter, a sacred book from the early 1300s, has an illustration of a graceful, majestic unicorn, except that whole symbol of purity gets totally wrecked when you realise the creature is farting. Okay, he's technically blowing flowers out of his rear end, but make no mistake, he's farting. Honestly, there are endless examples of this medieval obsession with butts. The Ormsby Psalter shows a monkey-like creature shoving a pipe up another animal's backside. In a 13th century French encyclopedia called The Greater Mirror, you can see a monk literally playing music out of his own rear end. And in one Flemish book of hours, two young guys are shown filling up a bowl with poop, which is then carried over to a noble lady who actually kneels down and worships it at what modern scholars call the altar of the anus. It's pretty tough to fathom why anybody would sit down and paint a scene like that, but it's downright hilarious when you remember it was drawn inside an official book for holy prayers. The thing is, people back in the Middle Ages looked at bodily functions totally differently than we do today. They didn't view poop with the same level of disgust or health danger that we associate with it now. Nobody back then had any clue that excrement caused disease, so while waste was definitely stinky and unpleasant, it was just an unavoidable part of everyday life. Raw sewage ran right through the open streets of many medieval towns, making bodily waste a totally normal sight rather than some forbidden taboo topic. And of course, just like today, butts and farts were simply an endless source of good old-fashioned comedy. Now, take a look at a 14th century copy of the Roman de la Rose, and you'll find a scene where nuns are casually picking penises off a tree like they were picking ripe grapes off a vine. After filling her basket to the brim with these rather large phalluses, which somehow shrink down size right after being plucked, the artist gives us zero clues about what she actually plans on doing with her fresh harvest. To make it even weirder, the illustration has absolutely nothing to do with the actual text written on the page. Oh, and just to top it off, there's another drawing right alongside it showing a nun in the middle of a very intimate act with a man. What's really surprising is that historians think these wild illustrations might have actually been drawn by a woman named Jeanne de Montbaston while her husband handled writing the text. The Roman de la Rose also packs in plenty of other explicit scenes depicting sexual acts, including images of men prominently displaying, well, let's just say some impressive full-on erections. Believe it or not, these kinds of naughty pictures pop up in medieval manuscripts way more often than you'd think. For instance, over in the margins of the Decretum, which was a 12th century legal textbook, of all places you can find a drawing of one gigantic flying penis. This oversized flying member has a smiling, totally naked woman riding on top of it, and the penis monster itself looks pretty darn pleased with the whole situation. Now, it's worth pointing out that the sheer amount of sexual imagery in medieval art wasn't necessarily just a secret rebellion against church repression. A lot of these seemingly shocking drawings were actually drawn right inside holy religious manuscripts to serve as strict moral warnings rather than a celebration of bad behaviour. Those medieval artists weren't trying to glorify or encourage anyone to get wild in the sheets. They were using shock value, humour and crazy exaggerations as powerful teaching tools to show people the spiritual dangers of giving in to temptation. When it comes to pure artistic strangeness, the absolute undisputed king of medieval weirdness has got to be the Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch. In his famous giant three-panel painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights, he went all out, filling the canvas with monsters, bizarre hybrid beasts, and people trapped in scenes that looked like they were pulled straight out of a fever dream or a complete nightmare. Each of those three panels representing heaven, hell, and the crazy middle ground in between is jammed packed with heavy symbolism shown through tiny, wild moments of whimsy and gruesome, macabre imagery. One of the most eye-catching figures in the whole painting is the infamous butterfly monster, a creature rocking a fish face with butterfly wings sprouting right out of its head, all while driving a massive sword through a helpless guy. In another corner, a pack of creepy green and grey beasts is brutally tearing apart a fallen knight. The garden also features a random duck hand-feeding a human, along with people riding on top of a unicorn-cat hybrid that looks like something straight out of a sleep paralysis episode. Over on another side, you've got a massive cracked egg crammed full of naked folks, plus an enormous lobster shell stuffed with people too. Then there's a giant monster with a baby bird head swallowing a guy whole, while tiny blackbirds come flying right out of the poor guy's rear end. Bosch's surreal world is a place where the wondrous and the gross live side by side, where deep symbols hide behind pure absurdity, and where every single weird figure practically begs you to figure out what it means. The truth is, we might never actually know the real meaning behind Bosch's work, since he didn't leave behind any written notes explaining what he was thinking. Either way, his paintings are a huge reminder that the medieval mind was anything but boring or restrained. Fast forward to today, and these medieval doodles have taken on a massive second life across social media, where their wonderfully unhinged style fits right in with our modern love for absurd humour. These bizarre scenes really speak to us because they show something awesome and surprisingly familiar. People living centuries ago loved the weird stuff just as much as we do, and more importantly, they had a fantastic sense of humour. When you really think about it, medieval marginalia were basically the internet's very first dank memes, just drawn with quills and ink instead of digital pixels. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Drop a comment down below and tell me which piece of weird medieval art was your absolute favourite, or let me know if there's a crazy doodle out there that we missed in today's video. If you want to dive into more videos covering all things medieval, we drop a brand new video every single Friday, so make sure you smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And for those of you who want to help keep the lights on and support the channel directly, we've got a Patreon and YouTube memberships where we post an exclusive bonus video every single month, which gives you instant access to a huge vault of extra videos we've already uploaded. Plus, if you really want to go the extra mile to support what we do, we've got higher tiers on both Patreon and YouTube memberships where you can get your name up on screen at the end of every video, just like these awesome folks right here. Cheers everyone. As always, I'll catch you in the next video. Have a great week.